Will you speak for me? I am here all alone in my mother's womb too. There is so much gloom and doom. Will you speak for me? Who's the judge, the jury? I am here alone, home. Are you standing there for me? In the House of Parliament, I have no argument. Government is on the bench, and opposition in my keep silent. Will you speak for me? I am here all alone in my mother's womb too. Is there so much gloom and doom in the courts of a land? I feel my mother stand. Lawyer just says she's free to do whatever with me. Will you speak for me? I am here all alone in my mother's womb too. There is so much gloom, gloom. Judge, bill, sentence to kill. Jury soon, she has no clue. I'm an unborn child, so what's my crime? I got no defense, no defense. Will you speak for me? I am here all alone in my mother's womb too. There is so much gloom and doom. Dr. Jackie is no hack. Nurse Betsy, who is next? The forceps and gloves, they reach for me, yet no one can help me scream. Scream for me. I am here all alone. Will you speak for me? Who's the judge, the jury? Whoa. I'm so all alone. Whoa. Will you speak for me? Government, judge, Jill, jury suit. I am here alone. Speak for me. Will you speak for me? Will you speak? Will you speak?
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this very special occasion on the event of the commemoration of World Health Day. My name is Philippa Davies. I am the Advocacy Officer for the Jamaica Coalition for a Healthy Society, and I'll be the moderator for this afternoon's gathering. So let me welcome you, Your Excellencies, representatives of government ministries from the Caribbean and Latin America, representatives of governing and opposition political parties from the Caribbean, representatives of NGOs from the Caribbean, Latin America, North and South America, and Europe. I believe we have present persons from Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, St. Lucia, Barbados, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Anguilla, Belize, Bahamas, the Cayman Islands, Antigua and Barbuda, Ecuador, Colombia, Guatemala, the USA, Canada, the UK, and Poland. And welcome also to other well-wishers and supporters of the sanctity of life. I am so grateful for your presence at this afternoon's information session on the Geneva Consensus Declaration, as I said, being held in commemoration of World Health Day, April 7th. Now, you may not know, or you may know, that World Health Day has been recognized since 1950 under the auspices of the United Nations with the aim of creating awareness of a specific health theme to highlight a priority area of concern for the World Health Organization. And the theme for this year is building a fairer, healthier world for everyone. The focus is on global action to eliminate health inequities. And the WHO says that World Health Day highlights its constitutional principle that, and I quote, the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of health is one of the fundamental rights of every human being without distinction of race, religion, political belief, economic or social condition, end of quote. And indeed, as our nations continue to grapple with the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, the pressing goals is and has been to preserve life and health and to restore health where impaired. And so it is quite appropriate that we meet this afternoon to consider and affirm the primary fundamental right of all human beings, the right to life, from conception to natural death. Now, let me just inform you that the backdrop to this afternoon's gathering on preserving the life of the unborn is the battle facing Jamaica and other countries over laws that prohibit abortion. And in Jamaica, abortion is prohibited without exception. And over the years, there have been campaigns to have the law repealed and abortion legalized in Jamaica. The most recent efforts saw a 2-year debate, that's between 2018 and 2020, before a bipartisan select committee of parliament, where pro-life and pro-abortion campaigners presented their cases. The committee decided to recommend that the matter be determined by a conscience vote of parliamentarians. But this recommendation has been criticized and rejected by many pro-life advocates. They firmly believe that the elected officials must represent the conscience of the electorate and the conscience of the people, as reflected in polls over the years, including the debate in Parliament, is that abortion must not be legalized in Jamaica. The lives of mothers and babies must be saved. Now, in addition to the parliamentary debate, there was also a report released by a policy think tank called Caribbean Policy Research Institute, CAPRI. That report was released in February this year, and they advanced legalization of abortion by a conscience vote, the provision of abortions to minors without parental knowledge and consent, and that abortion should be funded by the public. But thankfully, there has been widespread condemnation of this report as being anti-life, anti-child, anti-parental rights, and anti-democracy. And it was this report, as well as a general debate, that prompted this initiative, Caribbean for Life discussion series, spearheaded by Ms. Sarah Buckland. And it has been 6 weeks long of education, examining the untold costs of legal abortion. And we were blessed to have local and international experts address topics such as the social and economic costs of abortion, the medical dangers, the cost of freedom of conscience and autonomy, the psychological costs, and viable alternatives to abortion. And this afternoon is the culmination of a challenging, enriching, inspirational, courageous 6 weeks. And may I invite you from your spaces across the world to join me in applauding Sarah Buckland for her vision and her Herculean efforts in executing this tremendous educational exercise. Please, let us applaud Sarah.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And so this afternoon, is to present to you the Geneva Consensus Declaration, an international statement affirming the right to life of the unborn. And it was released in October 22, 2020, with 30 initial signatories. And now we're going to watch a brief video about the Geneva Consensus Declaration. Cheryl?
In every human being lies the power to change the world. Each of us embodies the very essence of life, love, and strength. Together, we want the world to know that our commitment to women's health, the family, a nation's sovereignty, and to life is more than just words. It is our everlasting vow. And we must continue to stand united. Signing the Geneva Consensus Declaration was only the first step. It is more important than ever before that together, through these uncertain times, we continue to carry the brilliant torch of these shared ideals and bring this light to all who will listen, proclaiming that we will see the promise we made through until the end, urging all those who are willing to join us. Because when our daughters thrive, our civilizations, nations, and families do too. Together we can make a difference. Together we can be a voice for the voiceless. Together we are stronger.
Thank you. Well, we are privileged now to have two keynote presentations to tell us more about the Geneva Consensus Declaration. And first, we'll be hearing from Miss Valerie Huber, who is former Special Representative for Global Women's Health, Office of the Secretary, Office of Global Affairs, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Miss Huber, you now have the floor. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Bahrain, Belarus, Benin, Burkina Faso, Brazil, Cameroon, Djibouti, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Egypt, Eswatini, Georgia, Haiti, Hungary, Indonesia, Iraq, Kenya, Kuwait, Libya, Nauru, Niger, Oman, Pakistan, Paraguay, Poland, Qatar, the Republic of Congo, Saudi Arabia, Senegal, South Sudan, Sudan, the Gambia, United Arab Emirates, Uganda, the United States of America, Zambia. What do these countries have in common? In truth, these countries probably have more differences than similarities. They represent 35 countries around the world and more than 1.6 billion people from every region of the world. They have different religions, different geopolitical realities, different cultures, diverse economies, and some don't even like one another very well. But despite their differences, on October 22nd, 2020, together, they made history. On that day, a little over 5 months ago, these 35 countries signed the Geneva Consensus Declaration, known as the GCD, a historic and first ever event. And that's the topic of my conversation with you today. In the next few minutes, I'm going to try to answer 3 questions. First, what is the GCD? Second, why does it matter? And number 3, how can you support the GCD? So first, what is the Geneva Consensus Declaration, the GCD? You're here because you've heard of the GCD, but working in the Trump administration as the principal architect of this coalition, I want to take you a little behind the curtain and provide a little bit more details. When these 35 countries signed the GCD, they committed to work together as a coalition on 4 priorities: supporting the improvement of women's health around the world, protecting life through all stages of development, and boldly declaring that there is no international right to abortion, defending the family as foundational to society, and affirming the sovereign right of every nation to make their own policies on these core issues. Never before had countries in unison not only said, "This we believe," but also, on these principles we are committed to preserve. The declaration is written almost entirely from statements previously agreed by member states at the United Nations or at the World Health Organization. What I'm saying is, these are not new ideas. They are basic pillars upon which the UN was established. They are basic pillars agreed in the seminal Human Rights Declaration. In fact, Almost all of the language in the GCD is exclusively quoted from documents previously agreed by the consensus of member states. So why restate them in the GCD, you might say? Well, it's important to restate these agreements in a contemporary document to refresh all of our memories of what we agreed and to remind us all that they should be core to other international agreements going forward. I really think of the GCD as a clear reminder that UN policy is set by the member states, not by any UN agency or advocacy group, or any individual member state for that matter. And a reminder that the agenda of any UN agency, of any advocacy organization, or any individual nation cannot override these foundational principles. And so I really like to think of the GCD as a uniting document where nations can affirm priorities that are often core to the very fabric of their nation and on which hinges broad consensus, while also boldly and publicly stating that issues for which there will never be universal consensus should not derail real advancements in women's health around the world. The fact of the matter is, around the world, far too many women needlessly die or suffer from preventable or curable ailments. The signers of the GCD support improved health for women as a global priority, and a priority that should be a priority for every single nation. The GCD is vital to strengthening the collective voice of signing countries and to prevent any country from being intimidated, isolated, or muted on these issues core to their national values: life, family, sovereignty, health. These countries came to realize that while individually they are strong, together they are so much stronger. And this takes us to the second question. Why does the GCD matter? Well, unfortunately, too often when negotiations take place at the United Nations or in other international settings, advocacy groups, certain donor countries, and even UN agencies intentionally set aside pressing health needs for women by turning negotiations into debates over controversial issues like abortion, where there will never be consensus. These UN agencies, member states, and well-funded advocacy groups attempt to redefine or replace hard-fought policies negotiated among all the countries. This isn't new. For decades, a well-funded and relentless international campaign has strategically made incremental success and gained momentum to declare abortion a universal human right and to undermine the family as somehow dangerous to the autonomy of the individual. Signers of the GCD oppose this tactic. This scheme actually violates women's access to essential health care, and it is highly disrespectful to nations who really desperately want to see the health of women in their country improve. But they're angry when resources to improve the health of their people are linked to the requirement that they adopt policies that are in direct conflict with the core principles of their nation. As we just saw recently at the UN Commission on the Status of Women, these controversial agendas are overtaking the entire portfolio of women's issues. Advocates of this agenda are aggressively working to insert a new term into agreed resolutions, into funding requirements, and into the conversation surrounding human rights. What is that term? Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights, or SRHR. No, the term was not a part of the ICPD, but these advocates dishonestly tell nations that it was. No, the term was not a part of Beijing, but they dishonestly tell nations that it was. If successful in gaining support for SRHR with these dishonest tactics, it will mean that for the first time in history, a term, SRHR, is asserting that there are sexual rights with no limits on its definition. It means that for the first time in history, a term, SRHR, is asserting that reproductive rights must include abortion as if it were a human right, in direct opposition to what member states have previously agreed. The careful negotiated caveats in ICPD and at Beijing don't apply to SRHR, but advocates of this agenda are making it seem as though they do. In fact, they're even telling countries that if they really care about women, if they want to see an end to sexual violence, if they want to find a solution to maternal mortality, they must support SRHR. And if they don't, well, then they really don't care about women. And in fact, they're saying that those countries who don't support SRHR are actually working against women, all the while telling these countries that the term is nothing new. It's sneaky, it's dishonest, and it's harmful because it's undermining real health advances for women by turning the debate into one about abortion and sexual rights and not meeting the real needs of women around the world. These SRHR advocates are systematically dismantling the sacred space where humanitarian assistance and healthcare could be given to those most in need, nearly anywhere in the world, because the humanitarian and health space has been kept intentionally free from these sorts of controversial issues in the past. And it can also have a chilling effect on the ability of faith-based medical professionals to serve in countries where they might be the only health providers in the entire village or even in the entire region. The GCD coalition opposes this decimation of global health on the altar of an agenda that will do far more harm than good. In 2019, we saw during the 25th anniversary celebration of ICPD in Nairobi, and this year in the Generation Equality campaign marking the 25th anniversary of Beijing, that both are throwing out the hard-fought agreements by member states made 25 years ago and replacing it with a new agenda that was not negotiated by nations, was inconsistent even with what member states agreed, and was all encapsulated in this new term, SRHR, Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights. What does this have to do with the GCD? Well, this March, we saw a concerted effort to insert SRHR in the CSW document, lobbying for sexual rights and abortion rights. Fortunately, the GCD coalition prevented them from succeeding, thanks in large part to Brazil taking the lead on supporting women's empowerment and advancement by insisting that controversial issues should not derail the forward progress that can be made. But I suspect that mounting antagonistic pressure will likely reduce the coalition's resolve without a meaningful counterbalance. And let me make it very clear, this agenda doesn't begin and end at the UN or at PAHO. No, in-country NGOs and foreign governments are pressuring pro-life and pro-life countries and pro-family countries to liberalize their abortion and family policies with the threat of losing foreign assistance if they fail to comply. And that's why the GCD is so very important. Because now nations are committed to work together in support of the family, of life, of women's health. And because the coalition rallies nations together, it makes it more difficult for any one country to be intimidated or silenced or threatened. In fact, the GCD is seen as such an effective international strategy that anti-life and anti-family advocacy groups warn that their decades worth of gains are in serious jeopardy because of the GCD. So maintaining, strengthening, and even building the GCD coalition is the best strategy to protect life, the family, and the sovereign right of nations to make their own laws on these issues. And this brings me to the final question. How can you support the GCD? I'm sorry to say that Under President Biden, the United States has already withdrawn from the GCD and is now aggressively participating in a push to introduce and normalize SRHR. In fact, the president has said that this is a priority in both our domestic and our international policies. In addition, many pro-abortion and anti-family advocacy organizations work globally and in countries against the family and against life, and they exert sustained pressure on these countries. I took a look online at the 5 most influential groups working against us on these issues. Each annually invest together, just those 5, almost $400 million a year toward this goal. That's a significant sum since it's mostly spent in developing countries where monies often stretch exceedingly far. Sadly, no one on our side contributes this much or this strategically to stop their advance. We expect the push to normalize SRHR to only increase. We expect the United States to negotiate an anti-GCD declaration with progressive nations. We expect relentless pressure on GCD nations to withdraw from the coalition. We expect pro-life and pro-family countries to receive increasing pressure to liberalize their laws. And what that really means is that your voice, your activism, and your efforts couldn't be more important than today. So, what can we do? Well, speaking personally, if God provides the funding and the opportunity, I am compelled to dedicate my next efforts in support of the GCD, not within HHS and the US government, but outside of that. To raise the awareness and the profile of the GCD, to educate about the real agenda behind SRHR and stop its normalization, to work with nations and NGOs to preserve and expand the GCD for the health of women, to protect life, to defend the family as foundational to every healthy society, and in support of the sovereign right of nations to protect life through their laws and policies. I'm currently looking for financial partners who understand the importance of GCD, but I'm also looking for those willing to use their influence and their voice in their countries to be used to its fullest in support of GCD. I suspect that might describe you. I hope it does, because it's vital for the preservation of these values that we hold dear. First, you can help raise the awareness of the GCD. Let me ask you a question. Do your members, do your colleagues, what about your network? Do they know about the GCD? Do they know about the importance of it? You can use your communication resources to raise that awareness throughout all of 2021 and beyond. Have you spoken about the GCD? Have you written about it more than once? Have you educated your network about SRHR? These are just a few of the practical things that you can do within your sphere of influence. And let me say this, that only you can do that within your sphere of influence. Second, you can help preserve and expand the GCD. Do the principles in the declaration ring true for your government? If they've not yet joined the coalition, use your collective influence to encourage them to do so. The declaration remains open for additional countries to join, and Brazil has agreed to record all new members of the coalition. Maybe your country has already signed the declaration. If so, you must bolster their courage and resolve. They are going to be under tremendous pressure to step away from the GCD. If they only hear from antagonistic NGOs, antagonistic members of Congress, and antagonistic countries, their resolve is going to be weakened. But what if they received thousands of thank yous from citizens in your country? What if parliamentarians weighed in to government leaders to thank them? What if all the influential NGOs in your country applauded your country's partnership in the GCD, encouraging them to remain strong? And what if this happened not just once a year, but regularly? Third, would your organization like to be a friend of the GCD? We're currently planning a GCD website that will include the declaration document, the list of signers, and a place for parliamentarians and members of Congress to show support as a friend of the GCD. There will also be a section for political parties and officials in large municipalities to show support. And there will also be a place for NGOs to show support by being a friend of the GCD. There's strength in numbers. Our voices matter, and only together are we stronger. As was mentioned earlier today, just at the beginning of today's conference, today's World Health Day, but it's also the day selected to annually commemorate the GCD and its pillars, reaffirming the commitment of coalition member nations and to invite others to join. Today is that first commemoration of the Geneva Consensus Declaration since its signing on October 22nd. Friends, this historic coalition must be preserved, and strategic advances made especially in the midst of opposition. Today, let us resolve together to commemorate and preserve this historic coalition. But let's do more. Let's raise the awareness of the declaration, the dangers of SRHR. Let's bolster the resolve of those nations that are coalition members. Let's invite other nations to join, not just today, but regularly. Make it a priority if you care about family, if you value human life, if you want more women to have healthy lives, if you think countries should not be bullied and disrespected and threatened to give up on these important priorities. Bahrain, Belarus, Benin, Burkina Faso, Brazil, Cameroon, Djibouti, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Egypt, Eswatini, Georgia, Haiti, Hungary, Indonesia, Iraq, Kenya, Kuwait, Libya, Nauru, Niger, Oman, Pakistan, Paraguay, Poland, Qatar, Republic of Congo, Saudi Arabia, Senegal, South Sudan, Sudan, the Gambia, United Arab Emirates, Uganda, Zambia. This list of countries depends on our support for their courageous stand on things that matter. You'll notice that the USA was not in that last group since the Biden administration removed us from the coalition. Your country is part of the globe. International policies don't stop at your borders. Think about it. What Caribbean nations could be added to that list that I just read? Could it be yours? Building the Geneva Consensus Declaration is the best offense against this decades-long international assault on life and the family. Together, we can be a force for good, and it's needed now more than ever. Thank you, friends, and God bless your work.
Thank you very much, Ms. Huber, for sharing with us the history, the motivation, and the objectives of the GCD, and how important it is to reaffirm at every instance the sovereign rights of nations to self-determination. And it's important to note that the language of the GCD reflects already agreed language, but with UN membership. And it's a powerful recognition that despite the differences among the GCD nations, they shared this common view on the life and worth of women and babies. And indeed, it is our fervent hope that the GCD coalition will increase in numbers, in strength, and in reach in days and years to come. So thank you very much for sharing with us. I'm now going to invite Mr. Hector Yepez, National Legislator of Ecuador and representative of Casa de la Vida, to now share with us. Mr. Yepez, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good evening to everyone. Please excuse any mistake in my English. I am from Ecuador and I speak Spanish. So in advance, I offer an apology for any misuse I could make. First, I would like to congratulate this important initiative to promote the importance of the Geneva Consensus Declaration. And I do so being from a country, Ecuador, that has not, unfortunately, signed this document, the GCD. We, as most of Latin American countries, unfortunately, so far, have not entered the Geneva Consensus Declaration, which is very contradictory because, as I will develop further on, most of our countries are very pro-life. The majority of our peoples are firm defenders of life from the moment of the conception, and it is a true paradox to see that our political elites are not coherent with that popular sentiment in Latin America. I am a legislator of Ecuador in our National Assembly, and I am also part of the NGO called Casa de la Vida, House of Life, which dedicates to support pregnant women in vulnerable situations. First, the Casa de la Vida convinces women to continue their pregnancy, especially when they are in a vulnerable situation and they are tempted to try an abortion. Our staff talks to women, offers assistance, health care services, psychological assistance to save the life of the baby. And then we work in a support not only to women, not only to the mother, but also to her child once he or she is born, with health care services. This is based in the city of Guayaquil, where I live, and the city I represent in our National Assembly, in our parliament. As I said, it is a paradox that our countries, such as Ecuador and most of Latin American countries and in South America, with the exception of Brazil and Paraguay, have not decided to enter the Geneva Consensus Declaration when most of our population is pro-life. Let me begin then offering a reflection on the importance of a GCD, talking from a third-party country, from a country that has not entered the GCD. Why is it important for us to have this declaration? Today, first, it is a pity that the new US administration has not continued the line of action of Trump's administration in defending life and family values. But today we are facing a very strong international anti-life and anti-family lobby that permanently tries to demonize the efforts of those who defend life, who defend family values. This is why it is important to have instruments as the GCD as a counterweight against many international documents, resolutions, declarations that, even if they are not binding, are constantly invoked by national and international authorities and courts to give the false appearance of a global consensus regarding abortion. And I think this is the adequate forum to state that there is no global consensus on abortion rights. What we have is a global consensus of certain elites that do not represent the beliefs of the peoples of the world and try to impose their worldview by undemocratic mechanisms that violate, in many occasions, the popular will. Let me offer a very concrete example in our continent, in America. Article 4.1 of the American Convention of Human Rights, which is a binding international treaty for most of our countries, specifically recognizes the right to life since the moment of the conception. And it specifically recognizes such right within the rights of every human person, whose starting point must therefore be established in the moment of conception. However, the Inter-American Court of Human Rights has decided that this is a relative right, that there is no full human being in the womb of the mother, thus opening an argumentative path to legalize abortion that has been actually used by several courts in America to promote the legalization of abortion in a domestic sphere. Thus, we see an undemocratic paradox. American peoples have agreed through their representative governments and parliaments that their right to life begins with conception in the American Convention of Human Rights. But an unelected court decides otherwise. This is why instruments such as the GCD are a fundamental tool to support, both in the international arena, in the diplomatic arena, and in the national debate, the position of pro-life arguments, of pro-family arguments, with the foundation in international declarations such as the GCD that unfortunately are very scarce in the global international soft law nowadays. I want to share also a second thought from the standpoint of an Ecuadorian, of a politician in a country that has not decided to enter the GCD. And I want to summarize this second thought with a very brief question. Why are we so afraid? We see a tension between political action and popular will on matters of the defense of life and family values. I represent the Ecuadorian people in our parliament. According to a recent poll, only in urban areas, more than 80% of Ecuadorians consider themselves as pro-life, and more than 80% of Ecuadorians say that abortion is the killing of a human being. I repeat, more than 80%. So, here comes the question. Why hasn't Ecuador entered the GCD when its content clearly represents the opinion of our overwhelming majority? The reason is that politicians are afraid. We have political leaders afraid of the elites in the media, in the academy, of losing funding opportunities, of being labeled as anti-establishment. However, this fear is undermining our democracy. We need a new generation of leaders. And by new, I do not refer to age, but to ideas. We need a new generation of leaders who are fearless in the defense of life and family values, who are not afraid to stand for what our peoples actually think. But we also need international support for those leaders. We need international funding. We need networks such as this coalition to have sustainable careers for leaders, academics, activists that defend life and family values and that decide to stand up against the very organized support for pro-abortion, anti-life, anti-family organizations and activists. I want to end this intervention sharing my personal experience. I am 34 years old. Actually, the GCD is very symbolic to me because it was signed in the day of my birthday. In the day when the GCD was signed, it was my 34th birthday, actually. So it was a very special day for me. And it has been an inspiration for the whole world. Even in small countries like Ecuador, where we have been fighting, for example, in our parliament 2 years ago, 2 years and a half by now, there was an attempt to legalize abortion. Some legislators, not too many, unfortunately, decided to stand up to defend life, to defend the human dignity, and we won. We stopped this attempt to legalize abortion only with 5 votes in our National Assembly. And right now, as we speak, there is a new attempt. This legislative period is coming to an end in May, but there is a new attempt to legalize abortion with no limit of weeks. And even in that same bill, where we had proposed to make a reform on adoption laws to facilitate adoption, even to allow the adoption process to begin in the moment of pregnancy in order to help women in vulnerable conditions. This bill proposes to deny this possibility of adoption from pregnancy, but instead it proposes to legalize abortion. We need to keep fighting because attempts to put human lives in risk will continue. So from Ecuador, I want to congratulate you for your efforts. I want to tell you that they're very important for many people in the world, maybe people that you don't even know about, but we are seeing what you are doing. We want to help you. And as the video at the beginning said, more or less, together we are stronger. And I want to end with this thought: you only lose a battle when you stop fighting. And as a famous song on Don Quixote, which is very, very dear to all Spanish-speaking countries, says, we need to keep fighting. We need to fight for the right without question or pause, to be willing to march to hell for a heavenly cause. And that's what we need to continue doing. I fully support this initiative to promote and defend in this difficult time with a new administration in the US, the achievement of the GCD, and we need to strengthen this coalition to defend life and family values worldwide. Thank you very much, and once again, pardon my poor English in some moments of my intervention. Congratulations.
Not at all, Mr. Yepez. You were quite clear and your message and passion came across. And for more than one reason, you have a personal stake in promoting the GCD. And as you've said, it is a battle that we're in, a battle between life and death. And the counteroffensive to lies is the truth. And you've spoken about the false appearance that's been painted that there is this global support for the killing of babies, when in truth, the majority of our population support life, to save life and to preserve life. And so it is incumbent on us to exercise the democratic freedoms that we have fearlessly, to confront the fear of our politicians, for them to stand for what they know to be true, and that is life matters. So thank you very much, Mr. Yepez, and thank you again, Ms. Huber. We are going to take 2 comments or questions right now before we hear greetings from other friends across the world. You can either post it into the chat and I will acknowledge it, or you can raise your hand and we'll allow you to speak. So 1 or 2 comments or questions. So there are thanks being expressed to both our presenters for their excellent presentations. Do we have any questions or comments at this time? There will be another opportunity later on in our program to raise a question. We have a question from Mandela Peters, who is in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Mandela, please go ahead. Please unmute. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much to the presenters for their presentations. I have a question as it relates to the response of CARICOM, whether any approaches have been made to CARICOM to sign on to the Geneva Consensus Declaration, and what has that response been?
Hi, I think I can respond a little bit to that. We invited most of the CARICOM nations to join the Geneva Consensus Declaration. And we did not hear back from most of them, which is also true of all Latin America. We also invited many of the pro-life Latin American countries as well. In truth, some countries in Latin America, including in CARICOM, were very close to signing, and actually Ecuador was one of those countries that was very close. But then when we weren't able to continue and we lost the election, all of those almosts went away. But I do believe that those of you who are here on this call can light that fire again in your countries.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question about how to get involved and mobilize the citizens of the CARICOM nations for our leaders to reconsider and signing. And so this is something, Christine, that we can do, each of us in our own territory. We know the lay of the land. We know the way to approach our respective members of parliament and ministers to sign on to this declaration. That's one reason for the information session this evening. So you're hearing the motivation, the rationale, the objectives. You received a copy of the document. There's a video available. But to know that there are other like-minded persons around the world who you can call on for support, for resources, and for us to pull together. So perhaps we can discuss, Christine, how within the CARICOM region, we as a group can reapproach our members of parliament and ministers for them to sign on to the GCD. Okay, I am now going to invite some other friends from across the world to bring their greetings and encouragement. We'll be hearing from Miss Valerie Kuykendall, President and CEO of Medical Institute for Sexual Health, who will speak to us about the GCD as a powerful tool in protecting children from early sexualization. Ms. Kuykendall, please, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, and good evening to all of you, our colleagues, and I hope by the end of our call, new friends from across the world. I was asked to make comments tonight in support of the fact that the GCD is a powerful tool in protecting children from early sexualization, and I just might make a few comments. As circumstances would allow, I had the great fortune of serving as part of an internship, completing my master's degree in public health with Valerie Huber, whom you've heard from in hosting the GCD, the declaration and signing in October, and was so glad to learn this important piece of work around the world, as has already been spoken of. I'd like to spend a few moments just highlighting this piece around children and the importance of education, because we find often on an international front, right alongside with those pushing for abortion rights and the legalization, and SRHR comes alongside the term comprehensive sex education. Comprehensive sounds like a good word, but perhaps, as we've spoken of earlier, is a sneaky word, or a word to get in truly harmful information and education to our children. So I have a degree in health education, where I learned the World Health Organization defines health as physical, mental, and social well-being. Whole person, whole health, thriving from a health perspective, or sometimes I use really the 5 parts of health: physical, mental, emotional, social, and spiritual. And if that's truly what we're about promoting here, then I think we see a conflict as we look at some of these policies coming forward. So I came out of school in 1995 and became pro-life, if I could use that term in that way, for the first time ever, given definition around the conflict and the risks to health, physical, mental, emotional, social, and spiritual, of abortion. And it was at that time that the direction I would be set on to was really in prevention. I was brought on staff at a women's pregnancy center, doing work like we've heard of already to help women facing a crisis pregnancy, facing that abortion decision. And it was there that I was brought into the field of prevention and health education, really sexuality education that upholds abstinence until marriage, that upholds marriage, healthy marriage, as the optimal context for sex. And what I would say in my comments this evening is simply that children are where our opponents go. If we can start in the education system and get these values brought in from an early age, the sexualization of children, there can be great harm done physically, mentally, emotionally, socially, and spiritually about the values that we have, as you heard of, for women's health, for families, for children, and the health of all, protecting life of the unborn. And we don't have time in this venue, but certainly it doesn't take much time to dig into some of the content being put forth for school children that contradicts the messages upheld in the GCD. So I would want to have all of us thinking about the message of compassion in prevention and education, and looking to bring these values, and watching for the opponent bringing them also in the battlefield of the schools. We want parents' rights and family rights to be upheld. We have 3 values. Again, I work at the Medical Institute for Sexual Health, and we have 3 values that we uphold: credibility, which is important for all of us in these battles and in our dialogue and in our discourse. Upholding these values is to always have credibility. The science is with us. The truth is with us. We are on that side, and I'm so glad. The other value we have is that another C word is compassion, that we have compassion for all. Ultimately, from that moment of conception, every life is compassion. Those in crisis, we face with compassionate responses, and also those who oppose us. We can take a strong stance, even though in compassion, for those who oppose us. And our third C, that is absolutely what you've heard on this call, is collaboration, that we would do it together, that we would shine our lights stronger together. One little light can drown out a whole room of darkness. And I hope you've seen in this call even that there are a lot of lights, and we are stronger together, better together, as has been the theme throughout the GCD, and that you would have the strength, again, to stand on the truth and fight for the smallest, who are often most at harm, and that we together then would be able to see every child as valuable, every life as valuable, that they would be given the information and the skills, and most importantly, the guidance and support of those who love and care for them most. This is part of this discussion around upholding life. and upholding family is starting with our children. So I hope that we can do that to give them the best choices, the best opportunities to succeed with their current and future health. I'm so glad to be a part of this work and offer any resources we can, upholding true sexual health, or as we like to call it, optimal sexual health, which is the best and is the physical, mental, emotional, social, and spiritual health from a sexual perspective in prevention and education. So thank you for allowing me to be a part of this evening as well.
Thank you very much for joining us this evening and for the work that you are doing through your institute. Thank you so much. I'm now going to invite Ms. Elyssa Koren from Alliance Defending Freedom to also share with us her thoughts, and she'll be speaking about standing strong against pressures, the pivotal role of a united Caribbean in global dialogue for life preservation. Ms. Koren, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's really an honor to be with all of you, to be with here this evening. And so much has already been said. So I really want to take this opportunity to make 2 points and to offer really an update as to what the UN has up its sleeve for the Caribbean. So I'll start with a theoretical point. And I think really the most compelling argument that we can make for joining the GCD is the extent to which this really indicates drawing a normative line in the sand. And this argument has already been made, but I think it's worth making one more time, which is that international law evolves by way of state practice. And if states fail to say no to the false idea that there's a so-called international human right to abortion, we know what happens, which is that international law essentially moves on without them. There's that risk. So the GCD prevents exactly this. And by bringing together governments from all over, it shows that not only is the pro-life fight alive and well, but it also marks definitively that there's been no evolution of international law on this issue. And clearly from a normative perspective, that's really important. But the second point that I want to make really is the practical point. And I'm sad to say that I've been at the UN for 10 years. And in that time, I've really seen what I guess we could call the fall of CARICOM on these issues with regard to any sort of group response to the social issues. And CARICOM, as I'm sure you are aware and can recall, this wasn't always the case. They were once a very powerful, very active group at the UN. They were aligned with Africa, with the Arabs, and with other developing countries. They defended traditional values, but they were also known for having their own voice. The group really was considered a uniquely positive force at the UN, one that brought disparate positions together, that served as a bridge, that was a moderator. And really quite pragmatically, when there were tensions, everyone would look to CARICOM to carve out a third way. And they would often succeed at this. And they would do this without losing the essential, without capitulating on the important issues. And in particular, I remember CARICOM being a force to contend with regard to the issue of protecting the innocence of children, shielding them from the abortion agenda and from the other controversial social issues. But this is no longer the case. And we know how this comes to be. We know how this happened. The powers that be at the UN, UNFPA and others, they put pressure from both inside the negotiation rooms and at the level of the capitals, and they pick off countries. So 1 or 2 countries will fall off. And the result is that the entire group goes silent. So nobody speaks. And we know that CARICOM is still there. We know that they still engage on other issues, but they don't engage on the social issues. And so at the UN, pretty much every day you have a situation in which you have abortion, you have other controversial ideas being debated inside the negotiation rooms, which is going to end up producing a UN document. Excuse me. And you have a situation in which CARICOM says nothing, total silence, no objection. So of course, you can have an individual Caribbean government step out on its own to oppose problematic language, and this does happen, but it's becoming very rare. It's increasingly rare because it overexposes that country. And so CARICOM's silence, it signals to the world that the Caribbean has given up, which we know is not necessarily true. It's obviously not a good look, and it's not reflective of your national positions. It's just not reflective of your laws. And it has the effect of leaving the other regions, such as Africa and the others, responsible for shouldering the burden of the fight alone. So whereas CARICOM used to be a participant that would fight alongside the others know now that they can't count on CARICOM. And so this increases the chance that obviously you're going to end up with bad language in UN documents and so forth. And a silent CARICOM, I mean, it's not just a disservice to the Caribbean. It really is a disservice to the world and to the international community when you look at it from this kind of big picture level. So I don't have the answer, and I don't have a clear-cut solution to this problem. Obviously, you all are the solution, the grassroots level, as has been said, and I firmly believe that. But I think that it's very clear that if you get more Caribbean signatories for the GCD, it's a formidable first step in, at minimum, it gets CARICOM a foot back in the door to get back its voice, and that is so urgently needed at the UN, at the level of the international discourse. Excuse me. And so one more thing, I just want to take a quick look at what the UN agencies are currently up to in the region. And I'm sure you're well aware of most of this, but I was really startled when I started taking a look at the figures. For the period, let's see, 2017 to 2021, the regular budget of UNFPA for the English and Dutch-speaking Caribbean is just shy of US $17 million. So that's a lot of money, with the stated goal of ensuring that all countries allow adolescents, so teenagers, minors, access to abortion, which is obviously in violation of your laws. You might also have heard that most recently the EU has partnered with UN Women and a few other agencies to bring an initiative called Spotlight to the Caribbean. And again, the sums of money that are coming in here are enormous. Jamaica alone received $8 million for this program. And it's really an example of what the UN does best. It cloaks, it hides its most insidious efforts in this kind of aura of benevolence and really of urgency. And so this plan is supposedly the world's largest effort ever to combat violence and discrimination against women. And we know how sorely needed this is. But really what it is a not so hidden campaign to bring comprehensive sexuality education, which was just described to us so accurately, to the region. And in February, I believe it was the 10th of February, this was accepted at the level of the CARICOM Secretariat. And I don't really know the mechanics, but I can assume that it'll be rolled out as governments allow individually or not if they object. And so UNFPA Caribbean, if you go on their Facebook or their website, they already note significant resistance from local teachers, which they've publicly indicated that they will steamroller, that they're more than happy to ignore. And obviously this resistance is due to the reality of what we know that this information is, which is radical information that really no child should ever be subjected to. So, teaching children to determine their own gender, obtain their own abortions, and really make their own choices, all while blocking parents' knowledge, their consent, and ultimately really their rights. So again, governments have to stand up to these things directly and say no to Spotlight coming into their country. It's really the only way. And we can assume that being a signatory of the GCD can only help give this, I'd say, coherence and energy and give a renewed sense of energy to these sorts of efforts. So I'll leave it there. That's all from me. I'm happy to answer any questions as to the particularities of these campaigns and all that. But for now, I'll pass it on to the next speaker. And I thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you very much, Elyssa, and also Ms. Koren, and also to Ms. Kuykendall. And attendees, I think we can see and hear the political and social importance of signing onto the GCD. There are multiple platforms where this declaration would impact. It's about children, it's about education, it's about health, it's about family, it's about life. And as Ms. Kuykendall says, science and the truth. That is what we are proclaiming, that's what we're defending. Ought we not to be emboldened to pursue our politicians to sign and stand for the truth? And what Ms. Koren has shared is really, it's a sad reversal of our heritage as CARICOM, where we're known for fighting for freedom and for independence. And now for us to be shrinking away in silence and in fear. We need a rise, a renaissance of CARICOM for us to make a stand against this imposition of ideals and ideology that is so contrary to what our forefathers fought for and what is good for the flourishing of our societies. So thank you again, Ms. Koren and Ms. Kuykendall, for sharing. Let me just pick up on some comments from the chat. We had a comment that it's a disgrace that the world's biggest democracies are taking this totalitarian approach and ignoring the will of their populations, indeed. And so that is why we need to make every effort to push our politicians and remind them that they're answerable to us, the electorate. We also had a comment that the church needs to urgently use their platforms to educate, to enlighten, to raise awareness of these very crucial topics affecting families. Thank you so much. Do we have any other comments? Do we have any other questions to our presenters at this time? Please note if there are persons who would like to sign on or to give support to the GCD. Ms. Huber has put her contact details in the chat. Yes, we have our friend from Poland saying that to be aware that Standing for Life ends with direct aggressive attack. We're well aware of that, but this is about life and death. This is the battle that we're in. And we count the costs, but it is fighting for the smallest, the most vulnerable in our societies. They are voiceless, but we have to be their voice. Perhaps our friend from Poland might want to give, to share a bit about the experience of the church in Poland when they stood in defense of the life.
Hello, everybody. I would like to, in first place, to thank for inviting me for such a great meeting, great conference. And in second place, I would like to apologize for my English mistakes. I'm Polish speaker, so English for me is foreign language. So please have patience on my errors. The case of Poland was the struggle to delegalize the admissibility of abortion in case so-called eugenic abortion in case of serious illness of unborn child. And this was a long campaign. It took about 5 years. The Center for Life and Family, which I have the honor to represent here, was widely involved in this battle. And there was, as Hector, for example, described, there was the same fear from the government. We have conservative, even sometimes called ultra-conservative government in Poland, but they were afraid of passing through the parliament the act which bans abortion in the case of eugenic abortion. So they passed it through the Constitutional Court of Poland. It took several years, literally. And what happened next? What is important? It was the same day as the signing of the Geneva Consensus Declaration. It was the very same day, 22nd of October 2020. And what happened next? We had several 100,000 people on the streets. They were very aggressive. They were anti-governmental. But what was the most important? They were anti-church. They interrupted several prayers. They attacked directly priests. We had hundreds of monuments, religious monuments, destroyed. So it was very, very sad. And what happened that in this it was just coincidence, but at the same time many cases of pedophilia in church were revealed. Some of them they were kept and prepared for many weeks, or many months, or many years but they were kept just for this instance. So just to make the long story short, it was attacked, which was supposed to destroy the moral authority of church in Poland. So if you do so, if your churches do participate, please be prepared that every kind of a false allegation can be used against you. So thank you very much. God bless you.
Well, thank you very much, Kazimierz, if that's correct. You were clear. And yes, alarming and frightening what you shared with us, but we have to fully understand what it is that we are involved in this battle for life. But we know who is victorious. And so we are going to defend truth, and we are going to stand for the sanctity of life. Thank you very, very much. So Ms. Huber, yes, please, go ahead.
I wanted to add a little bit of information onto what our friend from Poland just shared. It's true that the Polish government unrolled their pro-life policies on the very day of the GCD. And that was actually by design. The government of Poland contacted us and wanted to know exactly when the ceremonial signing would end so that they could then make their media public announcement immediately on the heels of the Minister of Foreign Affairs making his statement in support of the GCD. So while it is true that the full force of opposition to life comes when those sorts of policies are made, I also think that coalition of countries gave Poland courage to unveil it on that very day.
Thank you for sharing that, Ms. Huber. Yes, this is it's sharing information about the content and the motivation of the GCD, but also what the lay of the land is. What is the backdrop to this GCD? What is happening at the international organizations? What faces signatories, countries who would want to step out and defend life? So we must have the information, but we will go forward nevertheless. We must go forward nevertheless. So you've been hearing about GCD. Well, what exactly does it say? We're now going to read for you the text of the GCD. Myself, Sarah, Reverend Buckland, and Reverend Philip Gomes from Anguilla, please listen to the words, the powerful words. And remember, this is language that is largely already agreed by UN member states. And so it's been put together under this theme of preserving life and health. So the Geneva Consensus Declaration on promoting women's health and strengthening the family. We, ministers and high representatives of governments, having intended to gather on the margins of the 2020 World Health Assembly in Geneva, Switzerland, to review progress made and challenges to uphold the right to the highest attainable standards of health for women, to promote women's essential contribution to health and the strength of the family and of a successful and flourishing society, and to express the essential priority of protecting the right to life, committing to coordinated efforts in multilateral fora, despite our inability to meet in Geneva due to the global COVID-19 pandemic, in solidarity.
Number one, we reaffirm all are equal before the law, and human rights of women are an inalienable, integral, and indivisible part of all human rights and fundamental freedoms. 2, we emphasize the equal right of men and women to the enjoyment of all civil and political rights, as well as economic, social, and cultural rights, and the equal rights, opportunities, and access to resources, and equal sharing of responsibilities for the family by men and women, and a harmonious partnership between them are critical to their well-being and that of their families, and that women and girls must enjoy equal access to quality education, economic resources, and political participation, as well as equal opportunities with men and boys for employment, leadership, and decision-making at all levels.
Number 3, we reaffirm this inherent dignity and worth of the human person, and that every human being has the inherent right to life and the commitment to enable women to go safely through pregnancy and childbirth and provide couples with the best chance of having an healthy infant. Number 4, we emphasize that in no case should abortion be promoted as a method of family planning, and that any measures or changes related to abortion within the health system can only be determined at the national or local level according to the national legislative process.
Am I doing number 5?
Yes, Pastor Gums.
Okay. Reaffirm that the family is the natural and fundamental group unit of society and is entitled to protection by society and the state. That motherhood and childhood are entitled to special care and assistance. That women play a critical role in the family, and women's contribution to the welfare of the family and to the development of society.
We recognize that universal health coverage is fundamental for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals related not only to health and well-being, with further recognition that health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. That the predominant focus of healthcare systems on treating illness rather than maintaining optimal health also prevents a holistic approach, and that there are needs that exist at different stages in an individual's lifespan, which together support optimal health across the life course, entailing the provision of the necessary information, skills, and care for achieving the best possible health outcomes and reaching full human potential. And we reaffirm the importance of national ownership and the primary role and responsibility of governments at all levels to determine their own path towards achieving universal health coverage in accordance with national context and priorities, preserving human dignity and all the rights and freedoms set forth in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Furthermore, we, the representatives of our sovereign nations, do hereby declare in mutual friendship and respect our commitment to work together to ensure the full enjoyment of all human rights and equal opportunity for women at all levels of political, economic, and public life.
To improve and secure access to health and development gains for women, including sexual and reproductive health, which must always promote optimal health, the highest attainable standard of health without including abortion. We reaffirm that there is no international right to abortion, nor any international obligation on the part of states to finance or facilitate abortion, consistent with the long-standing international consensus that each nation has the sovereign right to implement programs and activities consistent with their laws and policies. Pastor Gomes?
Build our health system capacity and mobilize resources to implement health and development programs that address the needs of women and the children in situations of vulnerability and advance universal health coverage.
advance supportive public health policies for women and girls as well as families, including building our healthcare capacity and mobilizing resources within our own countries, bilaterally and in multilateral fora. Support the role of the family as foundational to society and as a source of health, support, and care. And
finally, engage across the UN system to realize these universal values, recognizing that individually we are strong, but together we are stronger. The original signatories, Bahrain, Belarus, Benin, Brazil, Burkina Faso, Cameroon, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Djibouti, Egypt, Eswatini, Gambia, Georgia, Haiti, Hungary, Indonesia, Iraq, Kenya, Kuwait, Libya, Nauru, Niger, Oman, Pakistan, Paraguay, Poland, Saudi Arabia, Senegal, South Sudan, Uganda, United Arab Emirates, and Zambia. And hopefully, we will be able to add more names from the Caribbean. Thank you very much, Pastor Gomes, Reverend Buckland, and Sarah Buckland. We will soon be coming to the end of this very historic evening together. We do have a couple more comments and questions. Please do send them in. Here is a question. What can church leaders do to support this work? And what difference will it make? I know we do have representatives from the church clergy among us this evening. Would any of you like to respond? What can church leaders do to support this work?
One of the things that we can do as a church, that the church leaders should have a series of lessons educating their members about the comprehensive sexuality education and why it is contrary to what God has commanded about sexuality in the Holy Scriptures, in that sexuality is restricted to adults of the opposite sex, male and female, in the marriage relationship, so that God expects abstinence from sexual relations and to wait until one is mature and to get into a marriage relationship that will last for life, in which children can be procreated or reproduced and brought up in a loving and caring environment. We also need to educate our members concerning why abortion is not right in the sight of God. That God is the one who has created us. He has created us in His image and likeness, so we have inherent value or dignity, that He has a plan for every life, and that God does not want us to destroy the life that He has planned for. We also need to write letters to the editor of our local newspapers or regional newspapers. We can do so online, expressing what God's word says concerning the comprehensive sexuality education and concerning abortion. We may also call in to radio stations like RJR, Power 106 FM, and Nationwide News Network, etc., and discuss these issues so that the public may become aware of the conflict between what God wants and what the United Nations may be pressuring governments in our region to legalize. So I believe that a lot of education has to go on. I also believe that those members of the churches that are in the education system of their countries should speak to the Minister of Education about the conflict between the syllabus that they're being pressured to teach and what God expects. I know when I was in the public education system, I spoke to two ministers of education from the two political parties because of the conflict that I saw between the health and family life education curriculum that the UNFPA had funded and had pressured the Ministry of Education to introduce into the education system. That syllabus encouraged students to accept homosexuality as a normal sexual expression, and also encouraged people to respect that kind of lifestyle. And I brought this issue up with the two ministers of education to try to bring some changes. And I believe that any teacher who is a member of the church should be concerned enough to speak to those in charge of education to see if reforms can be done, that we don't buckle under pressure. Philippa, if there anybody else that would like to comment on that, they can go ahead.
Yes, I'm going to invite Bishop Alvin Bailey. Sir, please, your thoughts.
Thank you very much. And I must commend your speakers. And I really am thanking you very much for this rather informative forum in which really I'm just elated. And I'm so much just affirming the different aspects of the accord, which was just written a while ago. And a lot of things are going off in my own head. In Jamaica, we have the church in Jamaica is pretty much understanding of its biblical position on abortion, and largely the larger denominations, primarily evangelical Pentecostals, are really firm on the aspect of no abortion, and in fact even against homosexuality, which was mentioned primarily. There's a smaller group which they are technically against abortion, but are prepared to permit abortion on some instances, in cases that the larger number of churches are saying, even in those cases, abortion ought not to be permitted. Where we are now is we are pretty much united against the legislation which is pending to legalize abortion in Jamaica, which is being discussed and is being promoted to be discussed in the House of Parliament. And the strategies which we are discussing between Jamaica Cause, my own local church, and Jamaica Coalition for a Healthy Society is what we're going to be doing, and we have some plans in the pipeline for that will be unfolded soon. And I have put on paper the plan to visit the person who's in charge of gender affairs with an organization of about 50 representative organizations to say why we are against abortion, where we are anti-abortion, and where we think the country should stand against abortion because of its implication for skewed morality and also for imposing a kind of culture that us in Jamaica don't know. So, you can expect to hear more on that from me, Philippa, and of course, Wayne and others, because I'm planning to get at least 50 organizations that are saying no to abortion and to a heightened response to morality, to visit the minister in charge of gender affairs and to put a position before her. Now, when I heard the points of the accord, I know exactly what we're to put to her. In fact, I think we could get a formal handing over of that accord to her and for her to understand where we stand. So I'm very glad for this, because it's a really comprehensive and complete putting together of our position as we stand for health. So, I'm just thanking you very much. And to say, even some of the things that, was mentioned by Joseph a while ago are things that we are doing. We are writing articles. I've participated in many fora on the matter of anti-abortion against some of the major proponents in Jamaica and pro-abortion and pro-person in Jamaica. I was at the University of the West Indies in another forum against abortion. So we are indeed talking, we're on talk shows and so on, and even in our private congregations. My congregation and my whole denomination, along with person at the New Testament Church and the head of that church, head of the Pentecostals and head of even the Adventists, we are against abortion, and we are talking together, we are talking to our congregation, and technically we are really just on top of things. But that which stands out in our mind, where we are in the scheme of things and in the discussion, is that there's a piece of legislation on the floor of Parliament. We believe that the only reason why it has not come to the fore as yet is because of the COVID emphasis. But then we want to be proactive and somewhat hijack that plan. I was very, very strident on the minister some time ago, and because of her propelling the government to get on with it, to pass the law in Parliament, and we believe that she was very insensitive, especially against a statement that the Prime Minister made, and I was listening to just before this program, on the heart of men that is deceitful and desperately wicked. He actually read that portion in a church service we're having earlier on this year. And on that basis, we are prepared to use that very statement to speak out against the senseless, and inhumane killing of unborn babies. So the church is pretty much on top of things. If I'm to, one of the areas that I think really need to improve is a sense of collaboration, coming together as one voice, as a church. And there's an organization which is called the Jamaica Umbrella Group of Churches that represents approximately 96% of Christians, that would tell you that they're against abortion, but there are some nuances where that is concerned. Well, I'll be asking them to be a part of the 50 organization to be talking to this Minister on Gender Affairs. And once we get that as an affirmed position and stand against abortion, we hope that first and foremost that legislation will not be passed in Parliament, and then secondly, we can deal with the matter of some of the abortions that are taking place undercover, and of course even by established institutions and known doctors. That's where we are, but the church is pretty much, against abortion, and we are doing something about it.
Thank you very much, Bishop, and for the roadmap that you shared elements of with us. And education is key, and taking a stand against abortion, but taking a stand for life, yes, for children, for health, for good education, for the family. And when we go to the political authorities, we're presenting this to them. We are not in favor of this. This is what we're in favor of. And this is why this is better for the good of all in society. Thank you very much. Are there any other persons who would like to make a comment or ask a question before we close? Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes, go.
Yeah, well, a comment and then a question. The level of activism that is in Jamaica is not too well reflected across the Caribbean. I would suggest that once COVID permits, Caribbean church leaders charter a flight and fly to Jamaica and get a first-hand view of the level of activism there. Very organized, very aggressive, fearless, and it speaks well. Whereas in many of the Caribbean islands, in the other CARICOM islands, the churches are not as vigilant. The churches tend to, there's more that sense of fatalism, that these are the last days, it's going to happen anyhow. And also the feeling that politics is not for the church to become actively involved in except to vote, and a failure to have a Christian worldview. So they're very intense in church and worship, but the moment we finish saying hallelujah, they go out and support politicians who are very much against the word of God. So my question to Minister Hector of Ecuador, since 80%, 70% of the population in Ecuador and across South America is conservative on its values, why a politician, okay, I think you said that politicians are afraid, but are they being faced with the counter pressure from their people? It seems as though the only pressure they are feeling is from international entities, funding agencies, etc. Are the churches militant in Ecuador and across Central America? Because since the votes come from the populace, are the churches flexing that muscle, or is there a level of passivity?
Thank you, Philip, for the question. Actually, the church, both the Catholic Church, which is the most representative, the church in Ecuador, I believe 80% of us are Catholics, but also the evangelical churches, which have a very strong and militant presence in Ecuador, they have all joined to defend life, and that activism from the Catholic and evangelical community has been essential. As I said before, we had this legislative battle in Congress to defend life, and we won with only 5 votes, but a crucial factor for that victory was that we had a lot of manifestations in the streets. We had a very large march for life, especially in my city, in Guayaquil. So yes, there is a very militant church, but we see that, let me put it this way, once the politicians are elected, and especially I have seen that in Congress, and they go to the capital, which is Quito in our country, then the lobby, the pressure begins, and then is when we have these problems and these contradictions between what the people want and what the NGOs, the elites in the media are pressuring every day. For example, the media is a great example of that. If you talk to journalists in Ecuador, most of them are pro-life, but political journalists, and especially the ones that are based in the capital, they defend abortion, gender ideology, etc. So that creates a pressure for legislators in their place of work, which is the capital. It's not their home province or city. So that's the challenge.
Mhm. Okay. No, I do appreciate you sharing that. If I spoke Spanish as well as you speak English, I would be a translator. You do a great job. So that is quite insightful. I thank you. I thank you.
But it certainly signals the necessity of continuous speaking of truth at all levels. So at the politicians, in the media, through the churches, to the teachers, you need multiple platforms with this one message, the truth about life and countering abortion. And so there needs to be multiple involvement, multiple levels, but continuously, never stopping, never resting in this work. Well, ladies and gentlemen, across the world, oh, this is so exciting. Across the world, we're coming to the close of this historic event of us commemorating World Health Day with this conclusion, this culmination of a 6-week series looking at abortion, the untold cost of abortion. But we want to affirm life. And we have done this today by presenting the Geneva Consensus Declaration to you all. Sarah is sharing the results of the poll where she asked if your organization or ministry is interested in joining or becoming affiliated with the GCD, and 53% of you have said yes, sign us up now. 37% are going to consider it further, and 11% said no, thank you. Well, we will work on you to convince you, to persuade you why you need to join with the 53% to say yes, let us sign up. It has been informative. It's been an excellent opportunity to intervene in churches, communities, and nations. There's work to be done, brothers and sisters across the region, and it must be done. It must be done. So let me just say in closing, thank you all so much for having spent your Wednesday afternoon, evening with us. Special thanks to our keynote presenters, Ms. Valerie Huber and Mr. Hector Yepez, and the greetings that were brought from Ms. Kuykendall and Ms. Elyssa Koren. And we heard from our friends in Poland as to their experiences. And really, there is no reason why, certainly for Jamaica, that we cannot sign on to the GCD. The declaration aligns with our existing national law, our international obligations, but even more, the treasured expressions of our hopes and aspirations as a people reflected in our national anthem, where we enjoin the Lord, creator of heaven and earth, to teach us true respect for all and to strengthen us, the weak, to cherish. So, brothers and sisters, friends, let us join together now to pursue life and to speak on behalf of the voiceless, on behalf of the most vulnerable and the unborn. And there are various strategies that have been shared, whether it's marches, whether it's education, it is lobbying the politician, showing documentaries in your churches about the anti-abortion movements. There is Unplanned, there is Gosnell, and there is a new movie coming out, Roe v. Wade. So there are resources available. And certainly the recorded sessions from the 6 weeks of the Caribbean for Life discussion series, which Sarah will make available on YouTube. There are resources available that we can use. And today is not the only time that we will be discussing and meeting with each other. Contacts have been shared in the chat, and Sarah knows you as well, and we will be in touch after as to how we can work together, build up each other in this common goal of defending life. So on behalf of the Bucklands and Philippa Davies, thank you so much for joining us from across the world. The Lord bless you in your own fight for life in your respective countries. Continue. La luta continua, Mr. Yepez. Continue what you're doing. Thank you so much. God bless.
God bless you all. Thank you again for joining us as well.
Thanks,
Thanks, Philippa, as well.
God bless you. Thank you.
God bless. Goodbye, everybody.
All right.
God bless. Bendiciones.
Bendiciones.
Bendiciones para todos desde Polonia.
¿Desde dónde?
Desde Polonia.
Ecuador?
De Polonia.
Thank you very much.
Well, good night, everybody, and God bless.
Yes. Good night. God bless.
Good night. Bye-bye, Casimirs. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Callum. Take care. We'll be in touch.
Will you speak for me? I am here all alone in my mother's womb too. There is so much gloom and doom. Will you speak for me? Who's the judge, the jury? I am here alone, home. Are you standing there for me? In the House of Parliament, I have no argument. Government is on the bench, and opposition in my keep silent. Will you speak for me? I am here all alone in my mother's womb too. Is there so much gloom and doom in the courts of the land? I feel my mother stand. Lawyer just says she's free to do whatever with me. Will you speak for me? I am here all alone in my mother's womb too. There is so much gloom, gloom. Judge, kill, sentence to kill. Jury sue, she has no clue. I'm an unborn child, so what's my crime? I got no defense, no defense. Will you speak for me? I am here all alone in my mother's womb too. There is so much gloom and doom. Dr. Jack, he is no hack. Nurse Beth say who is next? The forceps and gloves they reach for me, yet no one can help me scream. Scream me. I am here all alone. Will you speak for me? Who's the judge, the jury? Oh, I'm so all alone. Oh, will you speak for me? Government, judge, chill, jury sue. I am here alone. Speak for me. Will you speak for me? Will you speak? Will you